consumers today are less forgiving of poor experiences. So 53% of customers across industries either stopped spending entirely or decreased their spending after a poor customer interaction, which we estimate is going to cost about $3.8 trillion with a T of sales at risk in 2025.
Hello and welcome to The Ticket, the podcast where customer support leaders share insights on the future of customer service, support and experience. I'm Declan Ivory, VP of Customer Support here at Intercom. Today we're going to dive into one of the biggest challenges facing businesses today, the decline in customer feedback. Customers have never had more ways to share their experiences, yet recent research shows that fewer people are leaving feedback, whether it's in surveys, online reviews, or even conversations with friends and family. Joining me to unpack this issue is Isabelle Zdatny, Head of Thought Leadership at Qualtrics XM Institute. Isabelle specializes in helping organizations design and operate successful experience management programs. I spoke to Isabelle earlier and I began by asking her, why is customer feedback such a crucial tool for businesses looking to improve customer experience?
Yeah, so the analogy I like using here is trying to design good customer experiences without customer feedback is like trying to navigate a maze completely blindfolded, right? You might eventually get to the right outcome. You might find your way out, but you are going to bump into a lot of walls in the meantime. You're going to waste a lot of time and resources along the way. And so you can get from point A to point B. You can navigate your way through much more easily and efficiently if you're aware of your surroundings, if you know what's happening around you. And that's really what customer feedback allows us to do. And I will say when companies don't have customer feedback in place, there are two pretty substantial challenges that I end up seeing. So the first one is that they just design experiences based on what people inside the company think an experience should look like, right? Based on their own gut intuition and instincts. And this is a problem because there's an inherent disconnect between people inside the company who have a lot of knowledge about the company's processes and its products and its structures, and the people consuming the experience who don't understand or frankly care about any of that. And so you end up creating experiences based on what the company thinks customers want and not what the customers actually want. And then the second challenge, right, is we all have a finite number of resources. We don't have unlimited budget and headcount. If you do, please call me. And so we have to make smart trade-off decisions about where we're focusing. And if we don't have any information about how customers are perceiving their experiences, we don't know how those perceptions impact future behaviors, right? Value creating behaviors like repurchasing or recommending us to other people. And so we're just kind of taking shots in the dark about where we should be focusing our resources. And that ends up with a lot of waste. And again, maybe you end up delivering a good experience, but you're leaving it to chance.
Yeah, I love that idea of going blindfolded through a maze, and also like your perspective that ultimately it's not about leading with assumptions that we have, from an internal perspective, but really leading from that actual customer experience and leaning on that, and also using that information to prioritize what we're focused on, particularly where, like most businesses, resources are always a constraint and you need to make sure you're prioritizing them correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say, I think in the environment that we're currently in, and I'm happy to dive into some data if it's helpful, but I think it's becoming increasingly important for organizations to have that capability to sense, interpret, and respond to what's happening in the world around them. Customers' expectations are rising. We're hitting accelerating technological disruption. And so you need to be able to understand and adapt to customers' needs at an increasingly rapid pace.
I mean, I'd like to come back on that kind of, technological advances and what's happening, particularly with the role of AI in terms of potentially transforming customer engagement, customer experience, etc. So it's definitely something that I'd love to touch on before we finish up later on. Certainly, like you've spoken before about how trust is center of the customer experience. And how does trust factor into feedback? Like, do customers hold back from providing feedback because they don't believe customers will act on it? Or what other aspects of the customer engagement is causing maybe this lack of trust?
Yeah, I will say overall, right, I think trust is such a crucial topic that XM Institute actually named 2024 the year of trust because it is just so foundational to customer experience. And that's because ultimately, trust is a determinant of determinant of whether and how people interact with you. That's true for interacting with other humans, and that's also true for how they interact with an organization. And so if you think about it, filling out a survey, especially today, there's a lot of long, poorly designed surveys, that takes a lot of time on the customer's part, right? That's a burden for them. So if they're taking the time to do that, they're saying, I care enough about you to improve. I believe that you are going to take this information and use it to make changes as part of this relationship that we are in together. And so if they're taking their time to share their feedback, and then customers don't often, or companies often don't even acknowledge it, right? Let alone share how they're acting on it, that trust starts to erode. They feel like they're just shouting into the abyss, and that disincentivizes them from engaging with companies again in the future, and especially disincentivizes them from sharing their feedback again. And if we break trust down into its three component parts, right? Trust is made up of competence. So whether you think people can do what they say they're going to do, integrity, right? Whether they will live up to their stated values, and benevolence, whether they're prioritizing doing the right thing by you over short term gains. Asking people to take their time and then not responding to it is going to make them start questioning either your competence or your benevolence, right? They stop believing that anyone is listening to you or cares about them. So, definitely think it has an effect on feedback. And I think it leads to a downward spiral once you start losing that trust.
So effectively, if you're not closing the loop with the customer, effectively, you're not building that trust, you're not earning that trust, and ultimately that leads to kind of a level of disengagement. And I've seen that firsthand in my own career. I once inherited a team where they were great at surveying customers, but there was never any closed loop in terms of the actions. And immediately when we implemented a closed loop mechanism, we built up huge trust with customers, and we actually moved the needle quite substantially in terms of the customer experience. So that piece about trust and closing the loop absolutely resonates. So yeah, really, really good point.
I love that. And I mean, it's not just me saying it, like actually as part of the CX trend study that we did. So in Q4 every year, so last year we asked nearly 24,000 global consumers from 23 different countries, whole host of questions about their experiences. Some of them were around trust and loyalty behaviors. And we did find that trust is highly correlated with behaviors like repurchasing, forgiving the company if it makes a mistake, right? Not every experience goes perfectly. You want that goodwill if something goes wrong, and advocating amongst for your company amongst friends and colleagues. So again, there's a downward spiral once you start losing people's trust, but exactly as you say, once you start building it up, there's a really positive feedback loop that can come from that.
Your research, as you mentioned at Qualtrics XM Institute, shows that fewer customers are providing feedback, whether that's through surveys, online reviews, word of mouth. But, while we talk about trust, being one of the factors, what other factors are driving this decline?
Yeah. So, first of all, let me put some numbers around it because I find this research actually really striking. I will say this is the data point I feel like I'm talking most to CX teams about since we ran this research. So, since we started tracking this number in 2021, the percentage of consumers who tell anyone about their experiences, good or bad, has declined every single year, and it hit a new low this year. So, consumers are 7 percentage points less likely to share after they've had a good experience, and they're 8 percentage points less likely to share after having a bad experience. And exactly as you say, people aren't even telling their friends or family about it as much anymore. The only response option that went up was, I did not tell anyone about this experience. So then as to the what's driving it question, I think there's a little bit of a why bother factor, right? Going back to what we just talked about with trust. Telling people about your experience takes time, it takes effort. If you're not seeing any changes, why bother? We have a lot of other things to be doing with our time. And I think it's not just any single company contributing to this. This is an entire market wide problem. Customers today are just bombarded with survey requests. I'll tell you just personally, I still keep my old Yahoo account essentially just to house them all. And I work in this industry. I take surveys for fun sometimes to see how they're designed. And I have survey fatigue and feel overwhelmed. And then it's not just the sheer volume of what's coming in. I think there's also a problem with the quality of the surveys that's contributing to this fatigue, right? Often they're overly long, they're asking irrelevant questions, they're coming late after the fact. Again, no one's acting on it.
That's really interesting. I mean, apart from the trust factor, which you spoke about already, you mentioned kind of survey fatigue. And I think that's really interesting. And you touch on a point that I'm really passionate about, is the quality of the survey, and ensuring that you're asking the right questions, getting the right feedback, and the customer feels that it's worthwhile then engaging and giving that feedback. So really, really, really good points there around why we're probably seeing, as your research shows, this level of disengagement in terms of any feedback. And that leads me on to kind of the next point, because it's not just negative feedback that's disappearing, as you reference. Like, your data shows that fewer people are even sharing positive experiences. And does this point to a broader customer disengagement in general, or are there other trends at play here?
I will say our top line finding from this trends research from this massive study we ran was that consumer loyalty is getting harder to win and easier to lose than ever before. So, what we saw was that even though the quality of experiences actually ticked up a little bit, people were more satisfied, they reported having fewer experiences, those weren't correlating to stronger loyalty behaviors like, again, trusting or repurchasing. And we actually found that consumers today are less forgiving of poor experiences. So 53% of customers across industries either stopped spending entirely or decreased their spending after a poor customer interaction, which we estimate is going to cost about $3.8 trillion with a T of sales at risk in 2025. And so I think the broader trend here that's kind of underpinning a lot of this is rising consumer expectations. So historically, right, consumers would compare the experiences that they have with your organization to experiences that they're having with other companies in that industry. So you're insurer and you're bad at CX, that's fine. All the other insurers are bad at customer experience, right? No problem. But what we've seen happening in recent years is that what I would call nice to have companies, right, who sell discretionary goods and services. So think like airlines and hotels, fast food, retail. There's a lot of pressure on those sectors to deliver consistently effortless, delightful customer experiences, or their customers will walk. Just the switching costs are really low. I have a bad delivery experience with Walmart. Great. I will just order from Target next time. And so as a result, consumers started getting these really great experiences from certain companies. And that just, I think, raised the bar across the board. That started bleeding into other industries. It doesn't matter if you're a government agency or a health insurer or a public utility, right? Consumers start expecting the convenience of Amazon, the personalization of Netflix, the ease of Uber, and it becomes easier than ever to walk away, right? We're moving to more transactional relationships. And so I think a lot of this is a factor of customers' rising expectations that they're just not that wowed or impressed by good experiences anymore.
Interesting. So really, it's, as you say, customer expectations are rising. They're using different companies as their benchmark for the standard. They're typically, as you say, engaging in transactions that it's easy for them to switch to another provider. And that environment, they're not kind of motivated to really engage, in terms of providing feedback, because they don't really see the need for it because they have such choice. Is that kind of a good way, kind of summarizing the trend that appears to be emerging?
Yeah, I think so. I think also, you know, there's a lot going on in the world. And again, this is something that takes people's time. It takes a lot of energy, and people have shorter attention spans, I think. And there's a lot of other things that they could be doing. And so I think it's also, in my personal opinion, probably reflective of our increasingly kind of busy and highly engaged world.
Yeah, I mean, another point, I think, and maybe something we can touch on later, like the different channels that you use to kind of contact customers. I know you're on a personal basis. I just can't keep on top of all the email traffic again. And I now classify probably, 80% plus of that as kind of some form of spam in some way or other. And very often these surveys fall into that kind of perspective. It's kind of spam. I don't have time to look at it. So yeah, I think even the way or the channel you use to engage with customers is kind of something you need to think about. And a lot of companies still rely on traditional surveys to capture customer feedback. And, as you've noted, we all know that response rates are dropping, the level of engagement is dropping.
So, what are the biggest mistakes that companies are making when it comes to how they're crafting and delivering surveys?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I have already started talking about this a little bit, right? I think there's a few big ones here, and I'd say again that all of them, to my mind, really stem from taking our customers' time and attention for granted. So, first of all, surveys are way too long, right? Companies try to cram every possible question into a single survey because they think, well, we got their attention, so let's make the most of it. And that is just exactly the wrong mindset. Each additional question reduces the likelihood that customers will finish the survey. And worse, it increases the likelihood that they're just going to start straight lining or randomly answering questions to get through it. So, general guidance, right? Relationship surveys on a desktop, 10 minutes max. If it's on a mobile, 5 minutes max. Interaction surveys after a call or website visit, those should be even shorter. Ideally, a few questions, like 3 minutes. And so whenever you're creating a survey, one of the things we see a lot is that CX teams will have groups from other departments coming in and being like, "Oh, you're sending a survey? Can we just add this one question on product or this one question on marketing?" And you need to get very ruthless about only including questions that you are going to take actions on. You should know going into the survey, these are the outputs that we want to get and how we will be responding to them. So, a good rule I have is one question, one action. Second one I'm seeing a lot of is the timing of surveys. So, again, the world's moving very fast. Waiting 2 weeks to send a question about an interaction, probably either not going to get good information or they're not going to answer that survey. And so, ideally, here, especially again for interaction surveys that should be as close to the actual event as possible, you want to think about like how Uber does their feedback model, right? Giving the driver ratings is just embedded into the journey. It's just an expectation about completing the experience. So, how do we get a little bit more creative about how we're embedding feedback capture within customers' existing journeys? Another big one I see is irrelevance, right? We get static generic surveys, a lot of which might have questions that don't really pertain to us. There's no consideration of our kind of unique context or needs or goals. And again, here, instead of asking questions in moments that matter to customers, right? What are those moments of highest emotional intensity where their attitudes and perceptions really matter? We end up asking questions at moments that matter to companies. And I have a cool example of how when you personalize experiences or personalize surveys, it can increase response rates. But I want to pause there because I feel like I'm talking a lot.
No, no, but it's a really good point. I mean, I like the point around the timeliness of the survey. And actually, a question I'd be interested in your perspective. We have this debate internally every so often, like, how long should you leave a survey live for, for the customer to respond back? Like, should you time bound it, or do you leave it there indefinitely for the customer to respond to? Any kind of views on that or the implications of it?
I think it should definitely be time bound. I think generally the guidance is probably not more than like 2 or 3 weeks. And again, human memories aren't that great. So the further away from the experience you're asking questions about, the less accurate it is. Like people will answer questions, they will tell you things. That doesn't mean that they're accurate or going to be the best inputs for taking meaningful action based on them. So, yeah, definitely there's a trade-off, there's a balance there, right, between response rates and quality of the data you're collecting.
Very good. Interesting. We kind of settled on 3 weeks as being the sweet spot, actually.
Yes.
So, and I also love the idea of personalization because I think I think it's been a struggle historically for people to really personalize the survey. And, as we move to the next question, maybe there are kind of, technological advances that help with this. So, the next area I wanted to tease out, like if surveys as we've traditionally used them aren't working, like what alternative feedback methods should companies be looking at? Like, are there better ways to listen to customers in real time?
Yeah, there absolutely are. I think too, internally, businesses need to start by shifting their mindsets a little bit around data, like experience data, data about people's experiences doesn't just have to come from structured surveys, right? There's a lot of data out there. We live in a highly digitized world. Almost every action a customer takes with you is going to produce some piece of data that you can use to understand their experiences. So sometimes it's not even about standing up new listening posts, it's also tapping into the existing operational and behavioral data that your company already has on hand and start connecting those data sets together. So, on that note, a big one that we're seeing is digital experience analytics, right? Where you can understand how customers are engaging through your digital properties, right? Where they're getting stuck, what paths they're taking, where it's causing friction. So, you can start understanding, right, objective behavioral data there. That's really useful when you start marrying it up with people's perceptions and their attitudes. You can get a lot more predictive and understand, what behaviors are or what digital experiences are getting in the way of those types of behaviors you're trying to drive, like conversion rates and things. Also, on the note of tapping into data that's already available with the help of technology, right? It is becoming increasingly inexpensive and easy to capture and analyze unstructured feedback, unstructured data, which is an absolute gold mine of customer insights. And that can be both from your own internal channels, like your contact center interactions, whether that's chat or phone conversations, contact us form submissions, direct emails, but then we can also start scraping those external channels as well, like third-party reviews, social media posts, and online communities. So tons of unstructured information out there. I'm a little skeptical of it, but there's some statistic that's like, 90% of all customer data is in unstructured formats. So we want to start bringing those into our listening programs. One really cool one I will say that we're starting to see, which again, completely supported by new technologies, is adaptive surveys, exactly to the point of personalizing interactions. So instead of sending everyone kind of the same static generic questions, these surveys are able to adjust in real time based on the customer's responses and behavior. So it's more like a conversation where you have a trained interviewer conducting each and every survey, which produces more meaningful results. And there's one really cool example, I'll say, from one of our clients where they started applying these conversational survey tools to their attrition survey. Low risk, right? Customers are already leaving. And the two number one causes of attrition, pretty much always pricing and customer service. Okay. So they used to just ignore those because those were kind of generic and, they knew they were coming. They look at like what was the number three, number four reasons. Let's go fix those. What they found was that when this AI is able to dynamically adjust questions and people said bad service, they'd be like, that's concerning. Tell us more. What caused this bad service? And they'd be like, oh, we were transferred a lot. That doesn't sound good. Tell me about a time you were transferred. And from this, they managed to uncover a root cause of customer attrition was funds were being withheld or customers were being double billed because there was some like law enforcement things happening on the back end and agents weren't allowed to tell clients that. And so customers felt like they were getting the runaround and everyone was lying to them and not giving them good responses. And based on this insight, they're able to very easily create, more proactive script guidance for service agents where they're not breaking any compliance laws, but they're able to give a little bit more helpful information. So conversational surveys are pretty cool at when you do have surveys getting the most value out of them.
I love that idea of an adaptive survey. And I also love the idea of looking at operational behavioral data, looking at unstructured data. Like you do in our own operation, like from a support point of view, we analyze our kind of support conversations and we have generated what we call a customer experience score. So to some extent, we're not relying solely on the customer providing a survey to us. We will actually infer the customer experience, but based on customer oriented metrics, not assumptions internally, as we kind of touched on, at the start of this. It's really important. You look at it from a customer perspective. And again, AI is your friend here. Like it'll help you analyze 100% of your conversations and infer things like, well, if the customer had provided a CSAT score, what would it have been? Like what was the quality of resolution? And then you can merge that with kind of, more structured metrics like first response time or number of interactions with the customer. So there's really cool ways of developing very comprehensive scores now that are allowing you to, not rely solely on surveys, but also, as you said, we can improve surveys as well using technology like AI. I love that idea of an adaptive survey. So that's a really, really cool idea and one I'm going to take away from this conversation.
Yeah, and on the predictive models front, I would say this is also absolutely huge, right? We have one client who is able to have predictive satisfaction for 92% of their customers based on just 8% response rate. We have another one who, exactly to your point of bringing in behavioral and operational and experience data, they put it all together. I think there was like 26 different data points that they found, right? Like, what is their interaction history? Have there been any major issues? This is a B2B client. So what are the firmographic details? And based on that, they were able to come up with a predictive NPS score. And then they started, right, embedding AI even deeper into the process where that would automatically trigger generative AI to come up with a email response that the account manager could then look over, right? So it's not sending it actively, but can review and then send on to the client if, 4 of these 6 danger signs, danger signals get hit so that you can, again, proactively start preventing churn and stopping turnover. So there's some really cool things you can do. Again, not even asking more questions, just maximizing the information you have available.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such an incredible experience. If you have, what was maybe a lackluster experience, you haven't provided feedback, but then that supplier actually comes to you and say, "Hey, we know you didn't have the experience that we wanted you to have, and here's what we're doing about it." Like that's a pretty incredible experience when that happens, and we now have all the kind of technological groundings that we can do that at scale from a support or an experience point of view. Yeah.
It was actually really interesting. So one of the people I was talking to about this, they said that actually the biggest problem was on the change management front, that the account executives, like, they had to have a training session on probability because the account executives, they get a predictive score and be like, "Oh, this client is likely to churn." And then they'd call the client and the client's like, "What are you talking about? I'm fine. Like, I wasn't going to churn." And so then the account executive started completely ignoring all the recommendations. And it was like, no, 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 it's not 100% sure. It's just.
Absolutely, but it's giving you a guide. It's giving you kind of a a trigger in terms of somewhere where you need to dive deep and really understand the customer experience. Going back to kind of something we touched on earlier, like one of the biggest frustrations for customers is feeling like their feedback disappears into a void. And what are some of the best practices for companies to show customers that the feedback is actually valued and actually leads to meaningful change?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's right. It's like we've kind of touched on it, but there's really 2 key parts of closing the loop effectively. So first, you need to acknowledge that you received their feedback, and this should happen immediately. Even a simple automated response saying, "Thank you, we've heard you." That's better than silence. Ideally, you would like to personalize the acknowledgement based on what they shared. Again, in B2B, you might have a more individual relationship with your clients. And then second, this is where where companies really fall short, is following up on what actions you took based on that information, right? You said, "We listened, we did." And so getting really systematic about sharing those actions back with customers. And I don't think it's even just sharing back with the individual customer who provided feedback. If you have broader mechanisms like customer newsletters, success stories, and marketing messages, right? Sharing back broader stories about how you're listening and responding to customers incentivizes other customers to share their feedback and thoughts with you as well. So again, going back to that like positive feedback loop that you can help build, not just with those individual customers, but with your broader customer base.
There's really building up a flywheel mechanism nearly of, where you're kind of compounding the positive information you're going to get from your customers that help you then, make the right changes for them. Definitely, closing that loop for me is kind of critical. If you don't close the loop, you're eroding trust, you're really kind of incentivizing disengagement, you're definitely not building up, loyalty for the future.
Yeah, and it's one of the challenges we see a lot of CX teams wrestle with today is that they have a lot of insights, right? Again, there's a lot of data they can tap into. It's the taking action piece that I think a lot of them struggle with. And so not even in externally, but also if you can also use this as a mechanism to build buy-in and momentum for your program internally of, hey, customers are giving us feedback. We're able to go act on it. And then let's measure how that changes, key KPIs for the team, bring it back internally, because often, CX teams aren't necessarily the ones that even have full control over driving those actions. But it can also help grow your program and momentum for your program with your key stakeholders inside the company as well.
Absolutely, having that kind of, valuable insight, as you say, being able to close the loop internally as well. Like, here's the benefit we've achieved out of taking whatever the action is just as critical as communicating with the customers. So, like, a really, really good point. Isabel, if we kind of look ahead to the balance of 2025 and beyond, like, what shifts do you see in how businesses approach customer experience? What should companies be doing now to future-proof their strategy? And what role does AI play in helping to shape CX strategy going forward?
Oh man, how much time do we have left on this?
As much time as you need. I love to hear your views.
Well, so I will say, I have been undertaking a few quarters now research into how organizations are using AI to improve their customer experiences and not just best practices, but also starting to quantify the value of those improvements. That report is unfortunately not going to be published for a few weeks. Stay tuned because I think there's some really interesting findings in there about how, and it includes a lot of company examples too, about how they're using AI to improve customer experiences. I think as we look at 2025 and beyond, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, we're living through a time of really incredible change, right? Accelerating technological disruption, increasing difficulty differentiating yourselves. And so I think that a lot of organizations today understand the value of improving customer experiences to differentiate themselves from their competitors. The challenge is that a lot of traditional CX approaches, right, these periodic surveys we've been talking about, or generic interactions, or static reports, aren't really enough to keep up with this rapid pace of change, right? We have low response rates, data lags. They're helpful. We shouldn't stop doing them, but they're kind of insufficient in this world of rapid evolution. And so AI helps us do those activities at much broader scale and with much more speed. And so they're going to help accelerate our listening activities, right? We're able to understand, well, we're able to capture a wider array of feedback in more interesting ways, right? Always on listening, adaptive surveys. We're able to use AI to understand people's experiences better, transform that raw data into automated insights rather than just relying on data scientists who are great. We are still going to need them, but often by the time they aggregate and share their findings, the situation has moved on. It's helping us to share our insights. So you have dashboards now where people can just natural language query the data like they would, chat GPT or something. And one of the things we're seeing from clients is this actually helps stakeholders feel like they have more of an involvement in identifying actions from the data. So rather than having a centralized CX team come in and say, these are the 3 things you need to do, if a product owner is like, here's the data, let me ask a few questions, and then based on that, they come to these are the 3 actions I need to take, they feel a little bit more involved in the process and are more willing to do it. Obviously has, major implications how we're designing and delivering experiences. They can be more personalized. And then on the back end, right, AI is going to help optimize our processes and help us assist employees. Like we were talking about in the moment, the ability of generative AI to say like, hey, here's an email that, you can send to your account, saves our account teams a lot of time and effort and frees them up to make those more kind of human to human connections and the type of work that's more engaging for them. So I think we'll see that acceleration. I do think as agentic AI is coming. I don't know if it's this year. Sam Altman has convinced me. I think we're in a time of immense change, and so having customer feedback becomes more important than ever.
Absolutely. I mean, my own view, like having worked in the industry for close on 4 decades now, it's kind of probably the most transformational time ever in customer service, customer support, or customer experience, whatever term you use. And yes, AI technology, in particular AI agent technology, can help transform how you engage with your customers. But AI can also help how you measure or infer or understand the customer experience. And I think you've spoken a lot around where you see that going. And I'm really looking forward to the research you mentioned, seeing that in a few weeks' time. That sounds really exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. This is about I think we had a fascinating conversation about a fascinating area. Like, I think the whole area of customer experience management is being transformed by AI. You're correct. We're never going to stop surveying customers, and that getting that direct customer feedback is important. But the way we do it and how we do it and how we close the loop, we need to think about, and then augmenting it with some of the capabilities that AI provides, it absolutely makes sense. Surveying is not enough any longer in terms of customer experience management. Elizabeth, thank you for joining me today. It's a fascinating discussion. Yeah, thank you.
This is so much fun.
And just before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at inter.com/newsletter to stay updated with the latest trends in customer service and support. You'll find all the links in the episode description. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time on The Ticket.